We are live.
We are live. You gotta find it. And they're all in the air today.
Yeah.
That's all. Feel it. Okay. Chief, you wanna start off before we have Damien?
I'd like to know before Damien.
Okay. Once we walk through everything, we'll probably go our way now. We've been told this is a simple little bill in and out. The budget's coming right behind.
Well, we, spent, all winter long doing this, so, if it's that simple, we're probably just simple-minded, so.
It's a debt, says something, it's a simple little bill.
Yeah, I learned that after years and years here. Thank you.
We're on.
I thought I'd start by trying to depress you.
Thanks,
Rich. I know that, you've had, lots of things that have been, but, I thought, I'd start with what in, transportation, the cloud that hangs over us. What you see at the top of this page, is when they talk about declining, revenues from, combustion taxes. This is, adjusted for inflation and the trajectory of
To
what.
figure in what just happened to the gas prices last week.
Well, we did the actual to one line and then there's out. Logan can talk to you about the background of it, but to give you just an idea, when they say gasoline is the gasoline tax is dropping. This is just to set the background that we aren't just kidding, it really is dropping. And it's dropping not only because in most states it's not because it's not totally because of electric vehicle. In most states, the majority of it, and it is here, is because our combustion engines are much more efficient. You know, if you go back 20 years, it was hard to find a car that was over 20 miles per gallon, and now it's hard to find something that's under 30. So for any number of reasons, electric, hybrids, more fuel efficient cars. And this is what, when you figure, if you figure the T fund is really based in three areas: fees, fuel taxes, and purchase and use. This is what's happening with the fuel portion of that overall. The other thing that has been killing us when it comes to all projects is on the second page. What you will see is we've faced in the last 5 years a 60% increase in the cost of construction. And what you get is the lines, the green line is our construction line. The salmon colored line is our revenues, and you can see the gap that's been created over time. Since this starts in 2010, but you can really see with COVID in about 2021, you can see the gap that has been created.
Why the huge increase?
In cost of.
Yeah, I mean, that
Any,
was before we were blowing up oil in Iran.
well, and you know, during COVID, materials went crazy. And they didn't come down. And we're facing it in housing, we're facing it everywhere.
Yeah.
As recently, people would say to you in bridges, when you're doing steel I-beams that are aimed put tariffs on a steel.
But that
But-
wasn't in 21.
But it's part of
Yeah.
all of, nothing has come down.
No, I found it interesting that gas prices went up in 24 to 48 hours. But they're saying it's going to take like 3 to 4 years for them to come back down. And
I can tell
I
this,
mean, something is going on.
that gets into another area. I delivered a load of hay with the kid who's my young partner, who's 26 years old, just got married, is, brand new wife from last July is pregnant. And he's got, a trucking company and he trucks hay to southern New England, Connecticut, and he does feed stores. Todd has contracts with a feed store in Danbury, Connecticut, one in Rochester, New Hampshire. And, he has contracts that go out 2 months. We stopped, a little over a week ago on the weekend, to get diesel fuel. It was $6.20 in Ware, New Hampshire. He had built contracts. He was 26 years old and he's got secondhand. His fuel is 600 a week more. And he, because he signed contracts 2 months ago, he's having to eat the cost. That's $2,400 a month on a young couple. It's.
It is.
Yeah.
Getting.
And you can't, and I will tell you as someone that's been here a long time and been through, recessions. It worries me when we're in the longest expansion in, our country's history, that, if we go into a recession, the general fund is not in, it's okay right now. But in a recession, the general fund protects poor people. And if we aren't jealous about the revenues that go into the general fund to some degree, it will be on the backs of poor people. So the last of the three that I've got in the simple charts shows you, and pavement is an area that is of particular concern to us. And what you see in 25 is we are about 26 or 7% of our roads in our pavement condition is poor or very low. And if we maintain the spending levels we're at this time, and this is the agency's work, you can see that by 2030, we're at 60% of our roads in poor or very poor. And going out to 2035, we will be approaching 50% of all of our roads in very poor condition. The worry for that is that if I have a road that is on the regular cycle to pay every 8 to 10 years, if we're on that cycle, that road has a price. If I go to a place where we have let that go in, like the roof of your house, it leaks, it's 7 times more expensive to do a road reconstruction than it is initially. So you can pay me now, or you can pay me big time later. And the upkeep of our roads and the infrastructure we have, and I'm speaking now as the chair of transportation, for me, is not a need or not a want in state government, it's a need. And it is one, we can't have an economy, we can't get kids to school, we can't do anything without a transportation system in a place like this. And it's what keeps us up and our committee up at night. I would say to you that, we carried this, throughout this bill. And, I would say the T-bill that we're giving you is a little extraordinary this year. And, it's out of the box with ideas and in directions that we've gone. But given where we are in this place in time, we're afraid and we can't set. We said this morning, the agency, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about, one might say maybe you should cut some other areas in transportation to be able to fix this up. I'll start with our morning in transportation. We had the SCAN and we had a number of people that have been let go. The agency of transportation out of between 11 and 1,200 employees. We've let go of 62 positions in the last year. And this morning we had two people, very bright, young people. I probably shouldn't guess at their age, but certainly under 40.
Younger than some.
And one of them had just had a child and has been released. And I worry about that because as we do transportation bills and you do stuff, and it was very clear, the agency's under pressure. And if we're going to do T-bills that are only to fund us 1 year at a time, people aren't going to work here. The second person that spoke said, I'm applying out of state. As well as trying to do the shift here and looking for another state job, but I'm looking out of state because I don't have confidence that there is, that you're going to put the energy into making sure that there's enough revenue to keep the place going. So it's in our employees and what we hear, and I would encourage you, if you're going to do something short term to work on this problem and not give us a 5 or a 10-year plan, which most places do in the country, that the people that do paving jobs in the construction companies are not going to buy equipment. They're not going to train people and to do work for us. And if they move, pipe industry moves construction crews to Maine and states like that look like they've got longer term 10-year plans, that it's not going to be good for us. And we've got an agency that has really good people that work there. And but you can't run an agency like that and only have 1-year plans. It has to be done over time. And they have to have 5 and 10-year plans to be able to go forward. I would just give you a few numbers, in state buildings. The goal is to have 85% of our buildings in good condition. We're at 70. We're on the edge of dropping from that without. In central garage, 34, we're roughly 5 million short of the need in 27. And this is, Logan can speak to these numbers in plow trucks, 34% or 86 plow trucks need replacing. We're replacing 15 this year. Pickups, we're supposed to be replacing 37 or in need of replacement. We're doing 20. If you've got an unloader, we have 21 loaders need to be replaced. We're replacing 1. So central garage is probably not someplace we're going to do. Maintenance has had a $4.7 million reduction between 26 and 27. $2.4 million reduction in personnel for RIFs. $1.5 million reduction in stockpile and sales usage and overtime, so I can't go to maintenance. Town highways, who have faced the 60% increase in construction cost this year, the increase to our town highways is 2.7% in the aid for programs. And for those of you that are concerned about property taxes at the local level, I will remind you that my same property tax bill that is education has a municipal component with it. So you're talking about property taxes when we can't do any better than that. Public transit, I'll just give GMT, which is the largest. They've got a $1 million shortfall in urban transit in 27. They have a $2.7 million projected shortfall for GMT and urban transit in 28. We'd love to help them. I don't know where we would find the money for them. Logan can give you town highway bridges. We have because of flooding, fire, and the condition of bridges, we have 17 that temp bridges that have temp bridges on it. Closed bridges without a temp bridge on it, we've got 18. On the state routes, we've got temp bridges on 6 state highways. We've got some because of flooding, some because of condition, but all around. We have temp bridges and closed bridges around the state in that we need to deal with. In paving, and this is one of the areas that concerns us the most. The budget that we're looking at, we have 320 miles of interstate. We're paving 92 miles of that, which is more than what our goal would be. The state highway system has 2,700 miles. We should be paving between 270 and 300 miles a year to be on an 8 to 10 track. We're paving 56 miles this year. That's less than 2%. We're on a track on the state highway system to pave our roads once every 50 years. Part of the reason that we have moved money towards interstates is, and the agency did that, is because it's a 90-10 match for interstates. It's an 80-20 match. And what we've been handed, and particularly what is concerning about us from the House bill that passed, is the House bill takes 1 year of purchase and use, which is about $10 million, with no increase beyond that. And we're trying to cover a hole that's a $30 to $35 million hole in the T-bill to do that. And part of the way the agency had to do that, and it's not their fault, it's just where it is in it, is that they had to lean towards interstates to be able to make the federal match for all of that. And they did that, and I applaud them for what they did with what they had. Going forward, at least in what was presented to them, it does grow in what they did to purchase and use. And I understand that purchase and use in here is an extremely difficult issue to talk about because of where the ed fund in all of that is. But in transportation, at least the 5-year look gave us at least a 5-year plan to be able to talk to our own employees and our construction companies. And that's very quickly, the picture. There's no place for us to cut in the agency. The agency and the work, we have very good people working at the agency. I know there's people question the quality of the roads and whatnot, but I would tell you, we're at somewhat at the stress point. And, we are at the point where we can't keep up, and it's difficult for them. What you're going to see for us, we saw the budget. And there's little pieces, but in the high level, we saw the short-term 5 years. What do we do? That's one of the reasons why you see in what we did with purchase and use. It deals immediately with that 5-year short-term piece. And as you can see from the paving, if we in 5 years get to a place with 60% of our roads in poor or very poor condition, that will not be a good place, because the catch up will be terrible for us. You have vehicle miles traveled. The agency has brought us a plan to bring electric vehicles on board. That has been at least a 3-year process. I think you were in transportation 3 years ago when you put the $89 on, and the 89 would go, they would move to vehicle miles traveled, and the whole process around doing that. What we said in committee is, and Logan can produce the numbers, that if the purchase and use tax all came back because of the drop in gasoline and what it will produce, and because of the inflation, within 6 years, we would run out of purchase and use. So we said, what do we do to arrest the drop in gasoline? What do we do to level out? Knowing that if we expanded beyond electric vehicles and vehicle miles, that it will take years for us to build the systems to do it. It's taken 3 years and a $3 million federal grant to get electric vehicles to this point. It will take at least another couple of years if we try to load on hybrids and plug in, and it would take time after that if we try to move gas vehicles. So what you'll see is a plan with reports back and numerous votes and all of that to what would it take to bring the whole fleet of all of the cars on. And I would say with the plan is not to, as an add-on to gasoline, it's to stabilize this. And I'll give you an example for hybrids. What we have to produce is about $154 per car to be able to have each car pay for its fair share based upon the average use in the state. So if you have a hybrid in 2029, and we did proceed with all of this, and we got all the approvals and the reports back, they would be paying about 50% of that 154 in gas tax, and the rest would be in vehicle miles charged. So it would be a sliding scale for everybody, and it's meant to arrest the decline in revenue and make everybody pay equally. 1923, we put the gas tax in place in Vermont. 50% of all the cars on the road were Model Ps, and some of the other, but all cars at that time were someplace between 8 and 14 miles per gallon. So it was a narrow, very narrow band. The world we've got today, we've got electrics, we've got hybrids, we've got gas vehicles that are anything between 10 and 40 miles that you can get. The world has changed. There's nothing equal about what we're doing now. So we try to make it equal.
Do you want questions now or when you're done?
just have a little more, and then you're going to also see in this language about the local option taxes and the surpluses there, and we can direct the surpluses in there, not touching anything that we're doing. And we would move that into a special fund for town highway aid. And it would pay all of the towns on a formula based upon it. And because some of our feeling is with the inflation that they've felt and the pressure the agency is under, that it's very hard because it's all state dollars when we go to hand them with no federal match unless it's a bridge over 20 feet. So they fall behind. How could we get some consistent money there? So it's short term, longer term, arresting, and how do we get some money to the places like the towns that are in a really difficult spot? And, you know, we're at a point in time where the agency has done very well managing everything and putting it in place. But we're on the line. And from here, it's going to get, and I think you can see that in that paving chart. If we don't act, so we're trying to do something, what the transportation committee tried to do is hand you an overall plan with a big bill. And it's a little simple bill.
Right.
And we're sorry, but we would love to work with you.
Okay.
And I'm open to questions.
Okay. I have a few questions, but on the mileage based fee, one of the sort of critiques I've heard of it is what to do about transportation out of state, driving out of state. If you go on family vacation and you drive to the national parks out west in any of the vehicles that are subject to it, how does
I
it
think
account for
initially
that?
with electric vehicles, that's a question because what is proposed at inspection, you do that. But you'll see when you get into the language and part of the feedback to us over time is how there's multiple ways to pay. And one of the ways we deal with the immediate for electric cars is we put a flat rate in here and you can pay the flat rate and you're done at $175. And that's in the 2-year transition period.
Mhm.
Part of the reports and the things and approvals that we would have to do going forward is give us examples of different things you can do. In Virginia, you take a snapshot of your odometer 4 times a year and send it in. But if you choose, in Virginia, you can have a device in your car that will tell in-state and out-of-state travel. And so part of the decision-making process in all of the reports going forward between now and 2029 and 2031 would give us the information to be able to put together a system that hopefully would deal with all of that. And you see that in part of all the language.
Okay, does Virginia already have this kind of? Moving
There are a
forward.
number of states that are, it's voluntary system in Utah. Utah has a device. What is surprising to me is the cars, and I think this is right. I think it's about 20,000 cars.
Mhm.
Over about 50% of everybody's chose the device versus a one-time payment.
Mhm.
So, but all of that will be stuff. There is the technology out there to do that. But the problem is it all takes time to
Yeah.
develop. So if you don't do it over like a 5-year period, you
Mhm.
can't just snap your fingers and
Yeah.
stuff happens. But so we see this as a step process, bringing the stack information
Mm-hmm.
and and different votes along the way within the legislature to get us to the place. Very much like we've done with electric cars over this 3-year
Yeah.
period.
And the registration fee would go away, that's a higher registration fee, and it would be
That
replaced.
it's in,
with-
it's
Okay.
during the temporary period, for 2 years.
Okay, and then on the pilot stuff, I'm assuming somebody will go over the formula that you're using to redistribute the reserve funds back to
The,
municipal.
it's an existing formula.
Okay,
We, it would be for the towns. The primary place within that, we have town highway aid, which is based on the class of highway and you
Yep.
get paid by the mileage. We've had that in place for years.
yeah,
And the other place we could put the money, that we made is eligible is class 2 roadway and structures, which is our grant programs to towns. Those grant, a lot of smaller towns, you have a big culvert come up and it's gonna cost you 600,000.
mhm,
They're paralyzed to be able to move.
yeah.
Thereby, you're seeing some increase in the number.
No, I understand. I mean, I hear from, I'm sure we all hear from our towns about highway aid, or town highway aid, but
But it's-
I'm just curious because I know the pilot funding is very sensitive for the towns. And so wanting to make sure that if this is how we are going to use that, that it's distributed in a way
Well,
that all towns.
I
benefit.
think you should have the league in.
For sure.
Okay. And ask the league, because we've had very positive,
Yep.
indications.
Okay.
From them.
That's good to hear. And then my final question is on the revenue. I hear you totally sympathetic to the 5-year pitch that you made. And you probably heard, we've had conversations in here already about this. And one of the problems is that the solution you've suggested creates a hole in the education fund that's not viable. And so have you discussed, we have, but have you discussed revenue sources beside the new revenue sources to try to fill one or both or any of the holes that are created by shifting things around?
We have people at the table that have talked about, gas tax and indexing. I think there's a myriad of, opinions around our table. There was not a majority in the room that would do that. I personally would say to you, I think the gas tax in this day and age is regressive.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting a
Yeah.
gas tax, believe me,
Yeah.
not, especially not right now, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you guys had that
You
conversation about.
will,
revenue.
you will. Nothing that came out was big enough to fill our hole.
Okay,
If you go to a delivery tax, it's a handful of millions of dollars, creates all kinds of controversy.
so you were thinking about specifically within the realm of transportation, revenue sources and transportation.
Well, it's not our purview.
Yeah, no, fair.
I think in
Yeah.
this.
Just curious
point,
what the conversation's like.
Since you're already 5 minutes over
Sorry.
the time, that it might be helpful if we got to walk through the bill, so we know. How we're
I
talking
do have
about.
one other committee member here that she wanted to add anything.
At this point, no.
No, okay.
We need to start working on the bill. I think. I've heard this several times. I think the committee has. I think we understand the whole. And we know the importance of the whole. I think we also know the whole in education and the stress that property taxes are putting on people. And if there's a guaranteed veto to raise any new revenue, we're just into, now where do we shift pain?
Yeah, I'm totally, and
So we'll take our shot at going out to pain.
yes, we'd like to work with you.
Okay. All right, I think we're gonna walk through this, Damien. And yeah, we will see what we shall see.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, I'm Damon Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Would you like me to share my screen or just
I
walk
think
through?
that might be
Okay.
helpful, and everyone can see it.
Joining the meeting right now. So I'm gonna apologize right now. You were just talking about doling out pay, Madam Chair, and unfortunately I have about 40 pages to go through. I will go as quick as I can, because I know your time is short.
Just focus. Walk
That is the money.
really fast, yes.
Yeah.
Focus on money.
That is focusing on the money section.
Oh.
And skipping the appropriations.
Decisions that eliminated
Yeah,
one section on Friday, so.
yes, I heard that. So, let me go ahead and. Okay. So, I'm gonna start with, and this is in just the order of sections in the bill. The pilot special fund proposal from the committee. The main change here is found at the bottom of page 13, the top of page 14. It provides that if the local option tax revenues in a given year exceed the full amount of the pilot payments, including the payments to correctional facilities, and any amounts appropriated from the pilot special fund to the Department of Taxes for expenses related to grant lists and appraisal assistance. So you've paid out all of that. Whatever's left over in local option tax revenues in that fiscal year, this would provide that 3/4 of that excess amount be transferred to the local option municipal transportation special fund. The remaining quarter would remain in the pilot special fund. So this is not taking everything, all of the excess out of pilot, but it would take the majority of it. Section 7 sets up that special fund. Section 8 addresses the appropriations for that special fund. So the first is state aid for town highways. As Senator Westman mentioned, this is a formula program. Essentially, the way the formula breaks down is the money is appropriated under that program based on percentages that go for certain classes of town highways. So 6% for class 1, 44% for class 2, and then 50% for class 3. And then each town gets a distribution out of that based on its percentage of that class of roadways within the state. So if you have 1% of the class 1 roadways in the state, you take that 6% pot and you get 1% of it, plus your class 2 percentage, plus your class 3 percentage. Does that make sense? So what the language in the bill would do is it would say there's a base appropriation that goes to that every year. In the last couple of years, you all have passed transportation bills that have said that that amount that goes out to towns can't shrink. It can increase by inflation in certain circumstances, but it can't go down. In addition to that amount would be supplemented by the amounts from the local option municipal transportation special fund as appropriated each year. And there is discretion to appropriate between this and then the 2 grant programs that Senator Westman mentioned, the class 2 roadways program and the town highway structures program. I'm going to skip over the language for those 2. It is identical in that it says you can't decrease the base appropriation with this, but you can supplement it in a given year. So that does allow some flexibility if there's, for example, a year where we had a major flood the year before, there's a lot of demand for culvert replacements or culvert projects. You could send that money to town highway structures. It's not necessarily going to add too many projects to that, but it does allow you some flexibility with how you dole out that money. Okay. There's an additional appropriation in here for town highway in year 1 I'll skip over that. There's transfer from general fund to transportation fund. I'll skip over that. This brings us to the purchase and use tax revenues, which I believe the tax bill that you voted out has a different approach on this.
Yes,
So section 11 is your Senate Transportation Committee's proposed approach, which is essentially the governor's recommend delayed by a year. Section 12 is then the last step of the governor's recommend, which is to repeal the transportation or the transfer from the purchase and use tax to the education fund. And that would take place for fiscal year 2032.
neither the governor nor the transportation committee has a solution for the $60 million hole in the education fund, which would be filled by property taxes. Okay. That was the dilemma we were working.
This was from House Transportation, and then House Ways and Means stripped it and sent it over here.
So House Transportation, trying to remember. So House Transportation did not have this construct. This is Senate Transportation looked at a couple different constructs and went with this multi-year transfer. I believe House Transportation did not have this in their bill at all. The House construct you've seen, which is the percentage change. I think it goes from 66 to 72 to the T fund. So in year one in this proposal, there's a 10 million from the general fund to the T fund to replace the year one of the governor's proposal, which was approximately 10 million from the ed fund to the T fund. But this bill being the T bill does not address education funding. So I can't speak for the members' opinions as to how to address that. But this being the T bill, it doesn't take on education funding.
This committee is responsible for education funding, so
Understood.
we did address it, for better or worse.
Section 13 gives initial authority to issue transportation infrastructure bonds in an amount approved by the General Assembly. So the key there is that essentially we're giving you tentative authority to issue bonds. Please come back to us with a report on the amount. So it requires Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee or CDAC to annually report back on the maximum amount of prudent or transportation bonding that can be prudently authorized in each fiscal year. Ask the treasurer to consult with CDAC and review the requested issuance of transportation infrastructure bonds as part of the net state tax supported debt analysis. And then requires that beginning with the 2028 transportation program, that the agency essentially prepare a dual proposal, one that shows bonding for bondable projects, which are things like bridges, culverts, things with a 30-year or greater life. Just like
Not paving.
right. The important thing is, unlike general obligation bonds, the TIB bonds, or that's redundant, the transportation infrastructure bonds are funded by a surcharge on the gas tax. So it's a slightly different basis for the bonds. I'm not a bonding expert, but they're a revenue-backed bond. So this essentially then also asks them to compare the costs of doing the transportation program long-term with the bond proceeds versus with a pay-as-you-go model, which we've been using. And to look also at the speed at which you can deliver, understanding that there may be cases where being able to deliver a project sooner can deliver savings that may offset some of the costs of bonding, or maybe not. And this is asking for that report. That brings us to the mileage-based user fee. So you have Patrick Murphy from the agency on your agenda for later. And he can speak on behalf of the agency. I'll skip over the findings. As Senator Westman noted, the gas tax dates back to actually the peak year of production for the Model T. And so you can get a sense of where we were at as a country back then. That was that decade, the 1919 to 1929 is when basically every state enacted its gas tax. The federal government waited until the 30s to do theirs, but each state enacted their gas tax then.
Luxury tax at that stage.
They had to build the roads, and that seemed like the most logical way to raise the money.
Right, so that's part of the history there is you had roads had to be improved. You had this new vehicle, and gasoline, the mileage was roughly the same across many of the vehicles, particularly the mass-produced ones. Moving on to the actual fee itself, though, I'm gonna go real high level here. So the mileage-based user fee, this construct proposes to bring it on in 3 stages. The first stage would start in January 1 of next year with just EVs. The second stage that's proposed in this bill would start January 1, 2029. It would capture plug-in hybrids, mild hybrids, and internal combustion vehicles that get 25 miles per gallon or greater according to their EPA rating. And then in 2031, it would get all light duty vehicles, which is vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating. That's basically what does the manufacturer say your vehicle can safely transport fully loaded. So to give you a sense, it's a gross vehicle weight rating of not more than 10,000 pounds. So this is larger than an F-150, but not by a lot. So to give you a sense, it's a full-size pickup, but you're getting into probably not getting into a dually territory here, like an F-350.
So you said all of these cars, but just a really key point that I'm going to raise later on that I want to validate while you're in the chair is it's just Vermont registered cars that get inspected annually. It's not out of any out-of-state vehicles.
Yeah, it's just Vermont vehicles. So, and right now this would make us the 5th state with a mileage-based user fee and the 1st with a mandatory mileage-based user fee. The other 4 states that have the mileage-based user fee right now are Oregon, Hawaii, Utah, and Virginia. Hawaii is transitioning to a mandatory fee. Logan, can you remember if anyone else is? Patrick may know off the top of his head. But essentially states have been piloting this. Vermont would be the first to go mandatory for all EVs and then to roll out to the other vehicles. There are 4 ways initially that you would be able to pay the mileage-based user fee. So they are listed as an annual payment and a lump sum following the conclusion of your mileage reporting period. So that is from your initial odometer reading, whether that's your most recent inspection or when you purchase the vehicle, because there's an odometer disclosure, to your next annual inspection or when you sell the vehicle and get your next odometer disclosure. Pay as you go installments to the extent that the system is able to support it. It's not clear whether the system will be able to support that initially or not. That's something they're working with right now in the contracting process. But that would essentially mean that at intervals set by the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles, an individual can essentially take an odometer reading, send it to the department, and pay in chunks as they go. Estimated payments. So this is kind of like what you would do with your taxes. So this would set the estimate, and you could pay one lump sum annually, you could pay quarterly, or you could pay monthly. So if you are an average vehicle paying about $154 a year, it comes out to somewhere between $10 and $20 a month. And then finally, a flat fee of $178.
Okay. Senator Meadows, Senator Chipman, Senator Meadows.
Damian, does this fully cover the registration fee, so you don't pay a registration, or is this
It's
on?
on top of registration. So right now, if you own an EV, you pay your $89.
Yeah.
Or $163 1 or 2 year registration fee. You pay an additional $89 per year as your EV infrastructure fee. This will replace that EV infrastructure fee with the mileage-based user fee. So the additional cost for the average vehicle, around $65. Based on the calculations that have been done by AOT and UVM.
But
Would it- I'm just kidding. Since it's a $65 increase, would it be easier to just make that the fee?
So
Instead of having this whole entire program and tracking everybody's mileage and have the law of averages come out and just make it be the same amount of money overall? That might not be a question.
yeah, that's not a policy question that I can answer. It's certainly something that I think my counterpart from the agency can speak to.
Yeah.
What the mileage-based user fee does as a construct is it aims to track usage of the road. So if you don't drive a lot, you don't pay a lot. If you drive a lot, if you drive more, you pay more.
Yeah.
Similar to the initial version of the gas tax, where because most vehicles got about the same mileage, and the differences weren't like now where you can buy one vehicle that maybe gets 25 and another gets 40, and potentially pay half as much gas tax for vehicles that perform pretty similarly. Back then, there was a much smaller
Yeah.
difference from one vehicle to the next.
my vehicle tells me my mileage per gallon. Driving the whole mile between my house and the state house, I'm getting between 20 and 22 miles a gallon.
So this would be
I
based,
drove to Waterbury, I get 50 miles a gallon. Coming in from Calais, I regularly get 55 to 60 miles a gallon, driving the speed limit.
right?
I finally figured out your computer calculates based on your recent history of stop and go short term. My Honda tells me I'm getting 35, city and 40 on the highway kind of thing. What's it based on?
So this is based on your EPA rating. So EPA
Okay.
rating is
Whatever. Honda
relatively
says.
standardized. The engines are warmed up. It's a standardized test. It's generally considered to be a more conservative rating than, for example, the European mileage ratings, which tend to be closer to best case scenario. But it's true. If all of your driving in your internal combustion engine is on Route 2 and you're non-stop and go and you're doing about 50 miles an hour, you're going to get really good mileage on most internal combustion engines. The same is actually true for an electric vehicle. Most vehicles do well at that sort of steady state. So that's one of the challenges with the gas tax is folks will pay higher gas tax if they're in stop and go traffic than they will if they tend to do steady state driving. The mileage-based user fee is tied specifically to mileage. The biggest question here that has come up is the mileage that you travel in state versus out of state. So when you buy gas, you may not actually pay the state you're traveling through for the gas because you may have bought it in the state before or the state after. But generally, it's sort of the law of averages. You tend to spread out and states will collect gas from folks passing through who aren't registered there as well as the locals who live there. Mileage-based user fee can only collect from the registered vehicles in Vermont.
I've got, yeah, you look, I'm really good at answer.
The mileage-based fee seems really regressive to me. And the reason I say that is living in Burlington, we have a lot of hospitality employees, teachers, nurses who cannot afford to live in Burlington. They have to live outside the city. They have to drive a lot. We don't have the public transportation to get them there. And I'm just saying, I am really concerned about making those folks pay more because they're driving more. They have to drive more. Just putting that out
A
there.
good portion of the Senate office used to live in Hardwick and drove in here every day. There's where there are job centers. The guy out of the computer farm was driving down from Island Pond every day. There aren't any computer stores in Island Pond. So
Makes Island Pond so wonderful.
I know, and expensive. But okay. Snowmobiles pay a mileage tax in Island Pond because they don't plow the roads, so snowmobiles can drive.
So to the extent that they're buying gas at the pump,
They
they
are,
are paying the gas tax. So,
and even here it's better than buying.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that, my question is, I think with the gas tax, people who drive more generally still have to, there's still regressivity.
Yes.
with the gas
Oh, yeah,
tax.
there is.
Major regressivity.
Yeah.
But for what about, to the snowmobile point, what about vehicles that buy gas that aren't cars? And then also, what about out-of-state people who come here and buy gas? Is there
So-
still a gas tax?
yeah, so the way the
for-
gas tax works is it's at the distributor level, it's at the wholesale level.
Uh-huh,
So before it gets to the gas station, that tax is paid on the gallons there. So it gets built into your price. There's a sales tax at the gas stations. But other than that, the gas tax is actually on the distributors. And so they do quarterly returns or monthly returns. Monthly returns on the gas tax here on the amount that they've delivered. And so they have to provide invoices and so forth for all the deliveries they've made. And it, works out to, was it 32 cents a gallon? Give or take. About that. So 32 cents a gallon and then multiplied out by thousands and
Okay.
thousands of gallons.
but if you're, somebody who lives here part year and might have your car registered in another state, but you still live 5 months in Vermont, you wouldn't pay the mileage-based user fee.
If your car is not registered in Vermont and it's not registered in a state that has a mileage-based user fee, then you wouldn't pay the mileage-based user fee. At this point, there is not enough states for the potential for reciprocal
Uh-huh.
mileage-based user fee. That could be something in the future.
Mhm.
But that's not there. Some of the states that are piloting programs right now are piloting devices that can
Yeah.
essentially geofence your vehicle. So it essentially says when this vehicle is within the boundaries of, so Oregon is one state that has this program. When you're within the boundaries of Oregon, it's counting miles. When you cross the Columbia River and you're in Washington State, it stops counting miles.
So Senator Hardy's hitting on a key point that I have an issue with this, which is the fact that it's not going to go after those out-of-state users. Because I recall from, and I'd love for you to validate this or whatnot, that 20 to 25% of the credit card receipts at gas sales are from out-of-state credit cards. So it's a large chunk of out-of-staters that use our roads that are not going to pay this NBUF. So my question, I guess, to you, Damian, in the travels of this conversation, similar to Senator Matos, have you thought of an alternative approach? And relax. Imagine if we raise the gas tax. Bear with me, everybody's okay. If we raise the gas tax and then we credit it back, don't close up yet, all right? But we do the all right. We raise the gas tax, but we're not the highest in the nation, and then we give back Vermonters a credit, a refundable credit when they register their vehicles based on the fuel efficiency of their car. Go in any direction you want, and how many miles they travel. So we tax the out-of-staters for the use of our roadways. They're also not paying property taxes, and property taxes pay for all the municipal roads. And then we give Vermonters a discount back on that amount when they register their car. That seems like a much more easy approach to implement, but it'd be a gas tax, everybody, okay?
It has
Okay.
constitutional concerns.
Really?
Yeah, you get into interstate commerce issues when you start.
Well, they can register their cars here too. It's open to everybody.
Vermonters can also buy their gas in New Hampshire.
Yeah, this is actually, it's come up recently with toll transponders. Some states have proposed lower rates on toll transponders, the Easy Pass for their residents.
Oh.
And that ran into problems. New Hampshire is currently exploring whether they could avoid the constitutional issue if they opened up their beneficial rates if you just registered. Because you could get an Easy Pass through like 14 different states that are on the Easy Pass network. And if you just get your Easy Pass through them, but they're still not sure if that will pass constitutional muster, let alone charging allowing your residents to claim a gas tax deduction because they're a resident of your state. I think
Seems like that'd be a path more worth exploring.
I think
Yeah.
we should go through the bills. I think you should hear fiscal note. And then, because
we
we
have a
have,
half hour.
yes, that we have Logan, and then our 2:30 person has a hard stop at 3:15. Some of us have a chairs meeting at 4:30, and some of us need to pick up their car that's being inspected before 5 o'clock.
Is that you, Matos?
I don't know.
So you may have my vice chair by 4 o'clock, or
So-
walk down to Bob's Sunoco.
They're good down there. They do a good job.
Okay, let's finish this.
So I'm gonna
because-
skip over the nitty gritty of the different options. The bottom line for the different options is depending on which option you select. You're either going to pay in advance with the estimated option and then true up at the end of the year. You're gonna pay at the end of the year with the annual fee option or the flat rate. Or you're going to make payments throughout the year with the pay as you go. So, newly registered vehicles would be able to do the pay as you go option. Or the estimated payment option or the flat rate option. As they choose. The reason they don't get the annual MBUP option is there were some concerns about individuals buying a new car, driving 30,000 miles and then getting a huge bill that would shock, provide sticker shock at the end of the year. So they want to have people in the system kind of figuring out what their options are with, for example, an estimated payment and so forth. So the individuals can switch between different payment options. So for example, if you drive a lot of miles and you realize flat rate is a better option for you, you can switch. If you realize you prefer to do estimated payment, so make your payments up front so you don't have a big bill at the end of the year, you can switch to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mileage-based user fee is 1.4 cents per mile traveled. And it's based on, like I said earlier, it's based on the changes in your odometer. Take your most recent odometer reading and then previous odometer reading and you subtract it. Whatever that difference is, multiply it by 1.4 cents or 0.014, and you get your dollar amount that you have to pay. There are exemptions for state vehicles, US government vehicles, and short-term rentals.
But the state is exempting itself from paying a mileage fee.
They're coming from the gas tax. You can distributor.
So the
People exempt legislative plates from that.
yeah. Well, the
Sounds
legislative
fair.
plate is not a state of Vermont car, but if you'd like to add it, I can draft that language. The individuals can contest the amount that's been assessed if they think the readings are in error. There's a process for them to contest it. And if you're moving out of state and you have an overpayment, you can get a refund. So, or you're terminating your registration for another
But if
reason.
you drive to visit grandma in Pittsburgh,
And you're staying registered in the state, you will
Vermont,
pay
pay
based on your
to visit
odometer reading.
grandma.
So this is a tax, but it would only apply to Vermonters, even though we have another tax that would apply to everybody who uses the roads. The gas tax.
Let's call them toll.
Let's make it a flat rate, $138, right on, or just on, right on.
The whole gas tax to get everybody.
Your logic there.
Out of state drivers, 20% of the people use our
$78
roads.
on is grocery.
So they pay the gas tax when they're here and then they leave.
But they could pay more than gas tax.
Okay,
So,
we are having discussion later.
Second home tax.
Later.
so there, basically, this all runs on reporting, either the report from the inspection mechanic. When they do that report, there's an odometer reading as part of the inspection that's already taken. Or your odometer disclosure. Anytime you sell, you terminate a lease, or you buy a vehicle, there's an odometer disclosure that goes to the DMV. That's the key there. The only thing that's not covered under our current odometer readings is if your car is a total loss. It gets into a car wreck and it burns up, or for some other reason you can't get a final odometer reading. In those cases, the commissioner is going to have to figure out a process for doing an estimated reading or just waiving to get that. If you do not get your inspection or file your odometer disclosure, you are assessed the default rate of $178, so the flat rate, which, by the way, is also the cap that's set in the initial bill. So with the flat rate, the cap could go away in the future, but for now it includes a cap. And so you could say, I drive everywhere all the time. I'm just going to pay the flat rate under the initial construct here.
I would say when I was working as a realtor, I put over 30,000 miles on my car in a year.
Right. So different people drive different amounts. Some folks may decide, hey, I only drive 2,000 miles a year because I,
Now I'm driving
mostly walk
2,000
around.
miles a year.
Right. And so in that case, you might want to wait and pay at the end of the year and pay your $28. But if you have a long commute, et cetera, you may just want to pay the flat rate or do an estimated payment and true up at the end of the year up to the cap.
I'm thinking of the lower income people who can't afford. And we're getting more of the lower mileage into the second used car market, and that's gonna go. But people that have to drive long distances to work. There's certain employees that drive long distances to work. I wonder how that would, yeah.
So the enforcement mechanism in here is around registration. The bill has to be paid by the time you go to renew your registration. So the enforcement mechanism here is essentially that if you haven't paid your bill, they can refuse to renew your registration. So that is the option in here. And that tracks currently, if you have an EV and you don't pay the registration fee and your infrastructure fee, you can't register your EV or renew the registration. So this is consistent with that, although the dollar amounts may be different. In any case, if the commissioner is moving to revoke your registration, there is an opportunity to appeal the decision in a 15-day period, et cetera, and then process for appeals. Commissioner has general authority for enforcement and adoption of rules, to hire an account manager to administer and manage the program, and to develop forms. There's a right to an administrative appeal followed by appeal to the court system if you disagree with any decisions, similar to what we have for taxes. And then the changes in section 17 is just changing the EV infrastructure fee to infrastructure fee, because EVs won't be paying it. Section 18 sets out the initial transition. So for 2027 and 2028, owners or lessees of covered vehicles, which are just EVs at this point, your first inspection after January 1, 2027 starts your first mileage reporting period. Your second inspection will end it, and you can opt into either, if you're newly registered, your mileage reporting period starts on the date of registration. So if you move to the state or you buy a new car, it starts when that car gets registered in your name. And then the way you pay is going to depend on when you most recently registered your car. If you registered prior to January 1, 2027, and your registration will run through the end of your first mileage reporting period, you will get the EV infrastructure fee that you paid at your registration applied to your first mileage reporting, mileage-based user fee. If you register in 2027, before, or 2028, before your initial mileage reporting period finishes, or renew your registration, then you pay a road usage charge of $89 per year of registration, which tracks the current infrastructure fee, and that again gets applied to your first mileage-based user fee. So in other words, if you did a 2-year registration, you paid $178 for your EV infrastructure fee or road usage charge. That will zero out your mileage-based user fee for the first year.
I think, listening to all of this, I'd dump my EV. I'd go buy a 25-mile-a-gallon pickup truck and pay at the pump. And I mean, gas tax is simple. You pay at the pump when you use it. This has got court appeals and true ups, and you have to keep track of your mileage, and
I just paid a flat
So,
fee of $178.
To be fair, with every tax that we have, there is a right to appeal. We also have a right to appeal DMV fees,
gas tax.
and the tax is paid by the distributor. So they have a right to appeal. And you have a right to appeal Department of Tax's decision on your income tax.
Sure.
This was designed to make sure that people had the same rights that they have under any other program where the state is telling people that they owe an amount of money. So this is no different in terms of appeal rights. And I highlighted those just to make sure that you were aware that they're there. They are not, this is not a strange feature versus other tax laws or other mandatory fees. And we already, this is based on actually our existing DMV appeals structure. And all of it references back to that, which applies throughout Title 23 to the DMV's enforcement of driver's licenses and other fees that are required, titles, etc. Throughout Title 23. So I just want to be clear about that.
Just one clarifying question on this, but I agree with you. I feel like this might be an over-engineered solution, but I know it's starting to face, but I will ask, did I hear you say that this would make Vermont the first and only to apply a mandatory MBUF on all vehicles?
Yes.
And I don't want to count Hawaii, because Hawaii is not, so you can't really compare it to.
I
mean, they don't get out-of-state drivers. It's just, right?
I don't think there's.
Sometimes
Maybe.
Hawaii is not comparable to this. Would we be the only one to require MBUF on all vehicles?
We, as I understand it, this legislation, assuming someone doesn't speed up, would make us the first state that's mandatory on all light duty vehicles.
I just will say I don't, it's just worth this because it just doesn't seem like it's a fair assessment to just go after Vermonters that do their roadways and not everybody who uses their roadways, which the gas tax does. So I do support MBUFs on EVs and plug-in, because that makes a lot of sense, but for all vehicles.
So if I may, section 19 requires outreach, education, and feedback collection from the public. Section 20 gets into some of the design for those out years. So it's really important to note that the legislation here doesn't fill in some of the details. And this requires the agency and the DMV to come back with a plan for the transition to cover those vehicles. So the plan has to include additional payment options, including one that tracks out of state vehicle miles so that you can not be charged for those. It has to include a system of credits to account for an estimate of what you're paying in gas tax so that no one is paying more. It also has to include various classifications and so forth to figure out all of this. Ultimately, these reports come back next year and in 2028. So everything would be in before the 2029 session. So you would have time to make changes or delay. That said, it is a policy decision for you
Yeah.
as to how to move forward with this. But it's worth noting that your colleagues across the hall were aware of some of these questions and raised concerns about them. And their compromise was to have this report back for a transition plan to address some of these issues while also expanding it. Obviously, this is your call. You're the taxing
And I'm
committee,
gonna,
so
at this point, gonna
Yeah.
ban questions, because we're on page 40 something, we've got 80 pages to go through. I've
the
got
good news
another
is,
witness in 10 minutes and we haven't been through Logan. So we will
the
spend time on this.
good news is I've covered up through the only other thing that is in here that you need to worry about, because everything else gets away from the fees and taxes, is the last proposal in here is in 2031 or whenever the MBUF applies to all light duty vehicles, whichever is later. So it does contemplate the possibility of that 2031 effective date being pushed out. Then an inflation adjustment would be applied to the mileage-based user fee when everyone's on the same level. So one of the things that was raised in the committee across the hall is that none of our current revenue sources adjust for inflation. But no one was willing to adjust for inflation until all the vehicles were part of the revenue source. So this would say when everybody under 10,000 pounds is paying the MBUF, then there would be an inflation adjustment to the actual rate.
So over 10,000 pounds, business as usual. You don't pay that much.
That's correct. So if you'd like to vehicles 10,000 pounds or less, the study does ask to look at integrating medium and heavy duty vehicles. But initially, right now there's if you own a truck that's a medium or heavy duty truck, you already know your registration fees go up
Why are they?
as the truck's GVWR goes up. And so there are other factors in there that drive up costs for the trucks, and the committee didn't feel that they had the time to address that, but they've asked for the transition plan to start looking at that.
I could agree with them. And
Okay, I'm gonna yield to Logan.
Great.
Logan, the chair is nice and warm.
Gonna get warmer too.
Yeah.
All right, for the record, Logan for Joint Fiscal Office. I have a fiscal note for you, and it should also be on your committee page or on the office website. I'll put it there. I'll go through this quickly, about 10 minutes. So most of this Damien just walked through with you, so I'll just sort of retouch the highlights and mention the money where it comes up. The pilot special fund, construct that is in this bill, sending 75% of sort of whatever's remaining at the end of the year, so local option tax after paying for those subset of payments that were mentioned, that would be transferred into this new fund, the local option municipal transportation special fund. This amount is nothing in 27, and then in 28, assuming sort of a steady state, no new towns, no big changes, it's around $500,000. And then moving on, as Dan mentioned, moving down to section 8, this money would go to the town highway 8 programs, the structure programs, and the class 2 roadway programs. This essentially is trying to send more money out to towns for these various programs. Moving on from there, I'll skip through 9 and 10. Those are an appropriation and then a transfer. Section 11 and 12, you all have heard. I think at least from some of my colleagues and had some discussion, this is the purchase and use tax. I can go back through this if you're interested in it, or we can sort of skip this section as well. I don't know if there are any specific questions. This is nothing new from what you have already heard. This is just the sort of step down, sort of like what the governor recommended, but pushed out starting next year in 28, and then ending in 32. Sections 13 and 14, this is looking at the bonding proposals, giving authorization bonding, how much is prudent to bond, and then come back with some sort of options so that the transportation committees can sort of look at that in the future program proposals. Getting into the mileage-based user fee. So Damien sort of laid out the structure of the fee. I'll just highlight that starting January 1, BEVs right now would be assessed at 1.4 cents per mile on all miles driven in between 2 mileage reporting periods. This would go through the DMV. This would be done through your inspection process. They would calculate how many miles you've driven, times it by this 1.4 cents per mile, and then assess your fee. It'd be the maximum fee of $178. And then there'd be this transition period, which you all went through. And then they'd have essentially 4 different options they could choose from to sort of pay whatever this assessed portion was. So just briefly, the lump sum payment, right? That is, you can make this payment after your miles reporting period, you'd be assessed it, and then you have up to the vehicle's next registration to sort of make that payment. You can do the pay-as-you-go system, so report your mileage in sort of increments, and then you just have 30 days to pay that. Or do sort of a true up at the end. So when you do your miles reporting period, you get your actual miles based on what you reported. You'd be trued up, and if you paid more, you get some money back. If you paid less, you'd have to pay more money. Estimated payments would be at the beginning of the session, beginning of the registration, and would be based on sort of the average annual miles driven. For all pleasure cars, you'd be assessed the $10 based on that number, and then you can pay monthly or quarterly payments till you got to your inspection, at which point you again be trued up and you pay the actual amount. Or the flat rate option, the $178. If you didn't want to do the process or report your miles, you could just at the point of your miles reporting period, and you could just be assessed and say, I'll pay the $178 and go from there. As we mentioned, newly registered vehicles in the state would only be able to choose from the PAYGO option, the estimated payments for that flat fee, until they sort of get a mileage reporting period done. And then, as I just mentioned, you can sort of, or then if the DMV is unable to determine miles, they'll assess the base rate of $178. The transition period, so in calendar year 27 and 28, because vehicles will not have done their first miles reporting period because it needs 2 inspection periods. At the time of registration, they'll be charged a one-time road usage charge of $89 per year, or $178 per 2-year registration. And then once that vehicle completes its first mileage reporting period, that money would be credited back to the vehicle. So in addition, or in an alternative to this, you still always have this $178 option if you don't want to go for this period. And then getting into the sort of the fiscal estimates, the first paragraph here is just sort of noting that this program has a lot of different aspects to it. There are a lot of different payment options, payment periods, and then there's also a number of sort of owner choices that need to be made. When payments will actually be made, when they'll come into the state is sort of unknown at this period. So I've made a number of assumptions when creating these, but like a specific fiscal estimate is not really possible at the time until we sort of know what choices people are going to make, who's going to make what payments, who's going to do a flat rate, who's going to do the pay-as-you-go options, and when they will sort of make these payments within their own structure. That being said, it's estimated that the average BEV in Vermont drives about 11,000 miles per year at an MBUT rate of 1.4 cents per mile. That'd be an average MBUT of $154 per year. So in 27, most vehicles, all vehicles, because they would not be completing a mileage-based return period, would just pay that $89 road usage charge. We assume there are 13,500 vehicles. In fiscal year 27, it's estimated to generate between nothing or $600,000. And then in 28, you'll still have some people paying the RUP. Some people will have completed their first mileage reporting period and will be paying their actual MBUP on average $154. Meaning that in 28, estimates are between $1.1 million and $1.3 million. And then in 29, all vehicles will be paying an MBUP. And so estimated revenue generation from that is about 1.8 to 2.9, depending on the payment options and who does flat fee and who does mileage-based portion. And then to note, before I get to the chart here, that under current law, once the MBUP goes into place, the current EV infrastructure fee, the $89 that battery electric vehicles currently pay, will be repealed. This will represent a decrease in revenues into the transportation fund. Estimated loss in 27 from that repeal is $600,000. 27 or 28 is $1.3 million and 1.5 is 29. So this chart sort of shows you the numbers I just laid out, the increased revenue from the mileage-based user fee, and then the decrease from repealing that EV infrastructure fee. You can see in 27, there could be a slight loss up to about break even on that. 28, again, a slight loss to break even, and then in 29, up to $1.2 million. And then the last paragraph there under the thing just notes that this will continue to grow or change in accordance with BEV adoption and the rate that we adopt, get more BEVs into the state. Additionally, as average miles driven change, the amount of money that the state collects could also fluctuate based on changes there. And it is estimated that BEVs will continue to be an increasing larger share of the fleet. So we would expect this revenue to grow in future years as electric vehicles also grow.
So theoretically, no one's ever gonna pay over $178.
As is currently, no one will ever pay for $170.
And that's based on an average driver, right?
So
The 11,000 per year.
yeah, so that's the $154 is your average based on 11,000 times the 1.4 cents a mile. That's based on your average Vermont driver, I think. And then they'll pay the mileage rate 1.4 cents per mile up to $178, and then for miles driven over that, it's a little over 12,000 some.
How far does the average Vermont driver drive? Did you say that?
11,000.
11,000, okay.
Per car, like a household's twice that.
I don't know what the average per household is, but if it's two.
Probably all,
that makes
yeah.
sense.
Okay,
There's just
right on time.
one other
Oh,
section that I think you all need to be aware of.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this.
Yeah, so I'll just skip to that.
Jet fuel.
is the section 44
Oh,
Is
that's the
the-
one you forgot.
Yep, I apologize.
jet fuel transportation infrastructure surcharge. So this section proposes to add a 2% surcharge on the sale of aviation jet fuel in the state. Currently, there's a sale of jet fuel is subject to the 6% sales tax. This section would increase the effective tax rate on aviation jet fuel to 8%. Revenues generated from this would go into the transportation fund, and in accordance with federal law, there'd be used for aviation related purposes. This would specifically say infrastructure, aviation related infrastructure projects. Then assuming just they'll say constant in the future years, this would generate approximately $600,000 per year.
Okay,
To the past section, happy to talk about jet fuel, but on the past section in your joint fiscal note of you, I don't think this is what you usually do. You just look at revenues, but is there an estimation of what the costs to stand up this mileage tracking and all of the forms and systems is going to be? Is that something we've estimated at all yet?
So the money for this is coming from a federal grant, the strategic, something or another revenue collection grant that, the agency can talk more about the specifics, but they applied for this grant and got, I believe it's $3 million to sort of do the planning, the process, the setup and the creation of the system that will do all this. Again, I think the person that comes on next will be able to speak specifically to that cost, but a lot of
they
it.
have the money in the bank.
Yes, it is
Oh.
for the federal grant program is how the first stand-up portion of
But
this,
there's a federal grant
correct?
on paper, and there's a federal grant lately where if you don't have the cash in the bank, when you go to claim it, it might not be there. I know there's been more than one federal grant program that has been funded, so I just want to make sure we don't add another $3 million to the deficit.
I'm just worried that this is going to cost more than just a flat fee.
Sounds like it'll take about 3 years.
You've got
Patrick's on.
Patrick Murphy is on. And he is our AOT person. And Patrick, just introduce yourself to the record. Yeah, I'd say there's some skepticism or misunderstanding at this point on this. It's a little overwhelming, so let us know. And I suppose my first question is the governor in support of this? Do we know that?
Yeah, this one.
And buff, you mean? And buff.
The
Yes.
governor's,
And the legislature has been in the past up till now, I apologize, Joe Flynn, Transportation Secretary.
okay,
For all cars though?
No.
No, supportive of MBUF for EVs and BEVs.
Correct.
okay.
Great.
Supportive of
Two
flat.
supportive of that.
I'm sorry.
Is he supportive of the flat fee? No.
Well, the fee that's in place currently was proposed in
Just
concert
wants
with
to
the
be
legislature,
BV.
but is in favor of an MBUF versus a flat fee going forward, starting with EVs. And then a good conversation could ensue after that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just like we do now for your registration.
What I just heard though is that the administration is not supportive of an MBUF on all vehicles.
At once, correct.
At all?
At once.
At once.
4 to 5 years out.
Well, without a timeline, but what I didn't say was that they're not in favor of it ever. They're not in favor of it upon the onset. The onset is for EVs only. And there could be an ongoing conversation in the future about a transformation, but no time stamp.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Cheers.
Okay, Patrick, the floor is yours, and we will be quiet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Patrick Murphy, Agency of Transportation. It is the intent of our agency to be able to learn from this first phase of the mileage-based user fee. And so that is where you hear some differing opinions on where we should go with this in the long term. I think we first have to learn from how things work in this initial phase. I do want to clarify that for the chair that the federal Highway Administration grant of $3 million is fully obligated. And so we will be able to draw down on that, and we have thus far in the development of the program. I also hope to sort of clarify a number of things that have come up. I know you have a lot of reading that you've had to do with an 80+ page transportation bill. And so there are some 1- and 2-page handouts that have been posted on the committee page to be able to get a better sense of how this will roll out. And we can certainly get into questions now. I do have some slides to help walk us through, but feel free to jump in if there are other questions that come up. Can you see this okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So this does follow a long history. We began working on the mileage-based user fee back in 2021, and we've gone back and forth a number of times. There's been legislation in 2023 to direct the agency to begin work on developing this implementation plan, but also trying to obtain federal funding to implement. You all in 2024 did enact a flat fee, and there was some discussion earlier about a flat fee versus a mileage-based user fee. We do feel that in the longer term, it's a fairer system to be able to have the fee reflect what the actual impacts of the vehicle are onto the public infrastructure. And then last year, we had sort of a revised outline of what the legislature wanted to see for a program. And this is based on all battery electric vehicles as a mandatory program beginning in January 1, 2027. And then, of course, you have before you the transportation bill for this year to implement this in statute. The basic points of the program are really to align with our sustainable transportation goals that we have through the Climate Action Plan and other comprehensive energy plans, to in awareness of the growing number of electric vehicles that we have had and that we will in the future, to be able to address those decreased revenue concerns, to build on the existing processes that we have. So we have an annual vehicle safety inspection process. We're already obtaining the odometer reading data that we would need to apply a fee without getting into the concerns that other states have had with privacy, and without getting into the high cost of implementation of those other methods of reporting. So the plug-in devices, use of telematics right now in other states carries a quite high implementation cost on an ongoing basis. We also are building off of the legislature's investment in our DMV systems, core IT systems, over the past several years, over $50 million. And so that has been a solid foundation on which we will be able to build this fee. We've also wanted to make sure that we're still providing flexible payment options and frequencies for those that are accustomed to paying a gas tax just as you go, to be able to develop something similar to that. And as we talked about, leveraging the substantial federal funds that we have right now to implement this first phase and begin to learn from this first phase for electric vehicles. So we start small to allow for the time and flexibility to evolve the program, not only for electric vehicles, but to think about what we need for other vehicles that are also not paying the same as what an average gas vehicle is paying. So this is the language that we had from Act 43, the transportation bill last year, and what we based the design of our rate for a mileage-based user fee. UVM Transportation Research Center worked on this over the winter and submitted the proposal to both transportation committees. And so this just gives you a sense of how it was arrived at, not just looking at the gas tax now, but over a 5-year average, understanding that there are fluctuations within that, and then looking at real DMV data. So the odometer reading data that we have through the AVIP system and the registration data that we have for all vehicles within the FAST system, and combining those two data sets to be able to understand how different vehicles travel over the course of a year. And so this is also distance weighted, the average for a light duty fuel economy, which comes out to about 23 miles to the gallon. Getting more into the system setup, again, we're building off of existing systems, and I want to speak to one of the points raised earlier in testimony, that this seems like a confusing system. It does, because we've got lots of pages describing how we're going to do it, and we also have a lot to do in the background to be able to apply it. But how it will appear to the average user is really not very different from what people do now. So you'll encounter your vehicle safety inspection in the same way as it's required every year. You'll get your odometer readings. There's no proactive need to necessarily collect and track your own data. We're doing that through the existing process. And then based on two odometer reading data, we're being able to apply the 1.4 cent per mile charge. Then when you go to re-register your vehicle, again, you come to the registration process in the same way as you do now, and there'll just be an additional invoice. So instead of paying a mandatory $89 fee that we have right now, you will be billed based on your actual mileage, and then you'll have to settle up what you've paid. You'll then have the option to be able to select the way in which you want to pay for it in the future. So if you do find that you're traveling more miles and don't want a big bill at the end, you don't necessarily need to wait until the end at registration renewal. You can pay upfront, or you can pay on a quarterly or monthly basis. And so that's intended to help spread out those payments over the course of a year. Just going to walk through sort of this transition that we have, where people, in the absence of any odometer reading data, you will just continue to pay an $89 fee. In statute, it will be called something different, a road usage charge, but in effect, it's the same thing. And then that fee will later be applied to your first mileage reporting period. But in the beginning, we won't have any mileage data in the system. And so we have to wait until we've got 2 data points to be able to apply a fee. So in this case, you have drivers starting in 2027. They'll have their first inspection, which establishes that baseline data. And then when they have their first registration, if it comes afterwards, they pay an $89 road usage charge. They won't have that full mileage reporting period because they won't have had that second inspection. So they'll pay that first $89 road usage charge, and it won't look any different than the system we have right now. Then they'll get their second required inspection in 2028, and that's when an invoice would be generated. And so at that point, a user will be aware of what the amount will be, and they have an opportunity to pay at any point between then and their registration renewal the next time. So that's when it becomes due. They'll continue on at that point, being able to select where they would want to, or how they would want to pay and what frequency. So they'll have that first mileage reporting in the books, and then you'll be able to know based on how many miles you've gone in the past year, whether you'd like to select one or the other in terms of how frequently you'd like to pay. So this is going to work similar for other scenarios, but sometimes you're in different points in your registration and inspection schedules. In the case that the registration would come first, and again, this is just for a 1-year registration, you'd pay that $89 road usage charge. You'd then get your first inspection. You'd come again to your renewal period. There wouldn't be that closed mileage reporting period, so you'd again pay an $89 registration surcharge, and then you would settle up once your mileage reporting period is closed. There are other scenarios, obviously, where with a 2-year registration, and there are going to be some differences in the timing of this. With a 1-year registration, your Senate Transportation Committee has decided to apply a flat fee alternative in place, so $178, which acts as, in effect, as a cap on the amount that somebody would pay as a mileage-based user fee. And so, somebody traveling, basically the average amount would have already paid an $89 fee. There'd be a $65 balance at the end, and then they would have to settle that up before the point of registration. Again, they'd move forward through the system, and in the case that they traveled slightly higher than that average, they'd have to settle up that balance. When you get into other situations here where you would exceed the amount, you would be capped out. As soon as you're, the 178 represents about 12,700 miles. So if you went 13,000 miles or 14,000 miles, you would end up just paying that $178 fee. And that's in effect what this is showing. One thing to note, though, is that if there is a move to vehicles that currently pay some gas tax, you will want to come back and address this flat fee for a couple of different reasons. One, the first and sort of maybe the foremost, is that with a flat fee alternative, especially one that is set as low as $178, you are in the long term limiting the amount of revenue you bring in. So that real estate realtor who's going 30,000 miles a year is still only going to pay $178 per year, and that's not accurately reflecting the impact of her vehicle upon the public infrastructure. And so at some point you will want to make sure that that cap is raised so that you're collecting something that's more closely attuned to what people are driving. The second issue raised by it is just that you could get into a scenario where a gas vehicle has paid more than this amount in gas taxes, and so any system of fuel tax credits would have to account for the amount that it's already been paid in gas tax that exceeds that cap. And I think there may be some unintended consequences if you leave a $178 cap in place. So we just want to flag that for, the 2029 target date. I don't need to go through all these scenarios. If there are specific questions that you would like me to walk through, I can certainly do that. I think I do want to address a couple of the other issues that were raised before we break. One is around the regressive nature of the mileage-based user fee. And I would just say that this fee is, and maybe I'll stop sharing for the moment. This fee is no more regressive than your average electricity rates, than your water, wastewater rates, than your, natural gas rates, telephone, internet rates. They are regressive, but they're utility fees. And this is in effect what is being proposed as a utility fee for the use of roads, bridges, or infrastructure. Because it's capped at $178, it's no more than 14 some odd dollars per month. So in fact, it's a lot lower than all of those fees that I've just described. But it is less regressive than the gas tax, because what you have with the gas tax is not just mileage. You have the factor of fuel efficiency of the vehicle. So those folks with lower incomes, those who live in more rural places, also tend to have vehicles that are less fuel efficient. And that is the driving factor for how much somebody pays. So when you move to a mileage-based user fee, it has been shown through research by the University of Vermont, the Transportation Research Center, that folks are paying less on a per mile basis than they are with the gas tax. And then, of course, if you're shifting to the electric vehicle, which is what we're talking about now for this first phase, you're not paying any federal tax. If you're just moving to a 25 mile per gallon vehicle, you're actually, you're paying about the same amount in state taxes, but you're paying far more if you're in a gas vehicle for the fuel for those taxes, probably about $1,000 more per year. So it's important to just recognize some of those factors at play, and how does this really fit into the full context of how does this fee relate to other fees that we experience, and where are the actual savings for moving from a gas vehicle to an electric vehicle. So I just want to flag those points as well.
Patrick, I completely agree with you, and I want to make clear I do support the mileage-based usage fee for EVs and BEVs. I think it makes a lot of sense for those that use our roadways to help contribute to the cost of paved, paint, and plow them. My question is, and it might actually be for Damien, but I'd be curious if your understanding of this. The current EV and BEV registration fee goes towards EV infrastructure, if I'm not mistaken. We cordoned it off. Is that waived just across the board starting in 27? And then it just goes into general transportation costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the language that you have before you repeals prior language that directs the EV infrastructure fee revenue to ACCD programs that help support level 2 and level 1 charging at workplaces and multi-unit dwellings.
That's cool.
So all of the revenue from this fee then goes directly into the transportation fund.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. I got one more question.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I hate to butt in, but no. Michelle Boompower, Agency of Transportation. I think one thing that Patrick didn't stress relative to the federal funds that we have in the bank is that those funds were awarded to us based on our proposal to develop and implement a mileage-based user fee, which we pursued based on the legislature's communications to us about wanting to go in this direction. And so in the event this program were not to be implemented by January 1st of 2027, we have a negotiated contract in place with a vendor who's the vendor who already built our DMV system, who will be modifying it to make it able to do the tasks that Patrick outlined. And our excuse me, our vendor who does the vehicle safety inspections to sort of transmit that data. Federal Highway would require us to return the money to them, and then we would still have these contract obligations before us. And so I just wanted to make sure that context was on the table for the committee to be aware of.
Okay. Okay, committee. I think we probably hit tilt with transportation. And I'm gonna give us a 10-minute break. At which point we are going to come back and hopefully vote out the banking and insurance